Game over, man. Game over. Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
So simple.
Roll out.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Hello and welcome to Chasing the Gold. I am Shadan Larkey, awards editor at In Session Film and Chasing the Gold co-host. My co-host Erica Richards is off traveling, but I have brought an excellent guest today, Zach Youngs. First of all, if you have not read his reviews, do that, because he's an excellent writer. But for Chasing the Gold, he also covers picture, actress, and original screenplay. So he is one of my most cherished writers because he is always on time and always has excellent takes. So I brought you here today, Zach, because we have the first nominations of the season, which were announced, when was it, October 29th? And October 29th, the Gotham Awards nominations came out. 34th annual Gotham nominations, which will be held December 2nd, which is crazy because we are recording this November 4th. So it's happening. We are in full award season swing. How are we feeling, Zach? What are your...
It's quite a mixed bag so far. I feel like a lot of where people are at this point is undecided. This time last year, I felt like we had the omnipresence of Oppenheimer. And this year, I feel like there's no movie that's like really pushing to that point yet. We haven't found our front runner.
I would agree with you. So, and I mentioned this last week when I did a podcast with Will Bjarnar talking about sort of state of the race. I was supposed to have the Oscar predictions updated on In Session Film. By the time this podcast comes out, my full Oscar predictions will be on the website. But I was going through last night and kind of finalizing them, and I feel like the crop of films are very small. Like, I keep trying to be like, well, and there are other films in the periphery, but I just feel like they don't stand a chance. And I feel like if I'm just going based on what do I think will be nominated and not what I want to be nominated, there's not that many films in contention. Like, I was thinking about, like a movie like The Beast, which from earlier in the year I adore. And if it was up to me, I would, have it in production design, costume design. But I'm like, realistically, like, I just don't think, or something like Dee Dee. I mean, Joan Chen, spoiler alert, I will put her in my 10 because I adore that performance. But, like, I just feel like, are these movies going to break through? Or are we just looking at, Gladiator, Dune, Anora, these kinds of, like, The Brutalist? Like, how far outside of, these big main sort of meteor titles are they going to be willing to go this year?
Yeah, it seems like, at least in several years now, they haven't really dug too deeply beyond the kind of 10 or 11 that they're like, these are the solid ones. And I think once we get into the Gothams, it's going to be interesting to talk about because there's such a diversity in these ones, just between feature and director and performance. And so I think that it would be much more interesting race if we could figure out, or if this kind of momentum stays where, you get those kind of strange ones plucked out of nowhere and dropped into the race. That would be so much more interesting.
And we have seen, like, the past few years of Oscar nominations, multiple movies coming away with, like, 10 plus nominations on nomination morning. And I feel like we're in for another one of those years. I don't have much faith that there is going to be a lot of wealth spreading this year. Maybe we can talk about this, like what movie might pick up like the one-off nomination for sound or something. But I do feel like we're looking at a very clustered year. Two things about the Gothams too that I think is interesting is they removed. I think this is the second year. Well, this is the second year where I believe they removed genders. There's
Yeah.
genderless acting categories. And they also removed the $35 million cap on the film. So that is no longer sort of in the contention of how they nominate films. And traditionally, like if we're being honest, the Gothams are not a huge bellwether. Like that's we look at SAG, we look at Critics' Choice. Essentially, we look at maybe the Golden Globes. The guilds are obviously the biggest, I guess, precursor to if you want to look at accuracy in terms of the Oscars because the voting bodies are so similar. But I think what the Gothams have done, particularly this year, I think is momentum. I think they're putting a lot of people forward that maybe people have forgotten about
Yeah.
or written off. I think, like for example, Demi Moore and Substance. Like when I was talking to Will last week, and he was like, "I think Substance could potentially do really well." I was kind of like, "This guy, I don't know about this." But then now the Gotham nominations come out, and the Substance has done very well. So I'm like, wait, like maybe people are watching it, people are paying attention. Maybe there's something to that. So I think it's more about sort of drawing, getting eyeballs onto your movie and maybe getting sort of traction at this point in the race.
It's almost like looking at these nominees, it's almost like a picking apart of the current culture too, because you've got a lot of challengers in there. You've got multiple nominations for I Saw the TV Glow. You've got kind of these ones that people have been talking about all year, that are ones that probably would have been forgotten at this time, without the writers and actors strike last year, because it's kind of bringing it back into that arena of what do we still want to talk about, and what's not in our wheelhouse anymore.
And I think it's interesting because if you're like a guild voter and you're already getting or even if you're, a critic and you're as, are you in any critics group, Zach? I believe you are.
No.
You should be. Okay, well, if anyone is listening to this, put Zach in your critics group because his talent is ridiculous. But being lucky enough to be in a few critics group, like they're sending us screeners, like the screeners are coming in. So I think also one thing that the Gotham does is like I'll be like, okay, well maybe I wasn't going to watch something like Janet Planet, but now it's been nominated, so maybe I do need to see it. So I think that that's also where these nominations can be really, really helpful. All right, so I think we should save picture for last.
Okay.
Let's kind of pick a category and you want to just start like lead performance? Like let's just dive in. Okay. All right, so I'll just read off the nominees. So we have Pamela Anderson for The Last Showgirl, Adrian Brody for The Brutalist, Coleman Domingo for Sing Sing, Marianne Jean Baptiste for Hard Truths, Nicole Kidman for Baby Girl, Ghost, Keith, is it? Oh my God.
I think it's Kupferer.
Sure, for Ghostlight, Mikey Madison for Nora, Demi Moore for The Substance, Saoirse Ronan for The Outrun, and Justice Smith for I Saw the TV Glow. What stands out to you about this list, Zach?
This list is fascinating. I see a lot of names that I've been seeing, in a couple of different places already. A lot of people that people are already kind of clustering around. But then you get the left field of Pamela Anderson. And I've only heard of it because of this. I kind of did a little digging, so I was curious. And it sounds like a really interesting movie. I don't know if it'll have the momentum. And then my favorite was Keith Kupferer. So I'm so psyched to see him on this list, even though it's the only Ghostlight that we've got here. It's like, oh yes, we're still kind of being evangelists for this incredible movie. That's really exciting. So I'm kind of loving the mix that we've got here.
Yeah, I mean, of this list, I think we can look at like Adrian Brody, Coleman Domingo, Mikey Madison, and maybe Nicole Kidman and say they feel safe in
Yeah.
terms of the broader season. But everyone else sort of feels like they've been given a major boost here. I was lucky enough to see The Last Showgirl at TIFF. Pamela Anderson is very, very good. I'm so, happy that she's getting this boost. This movie is tiny, which is why, again, I think these kinds of nominations will help because I think now people are going to be like, well, let me watch this movie that I
Yeah.
have not heard about. So I would love it if maybe she popped up in Critics' Choice or if she was sort of maybe a SAG. You know how sometimes we see some surprise SAG nominees. I feel like that's something that could come through. I mean, for me, I mentioned like Demi Moore for the substance. I, that was just one of those movies where I was like, this might just be like an internet thing, and I think seeing it pop up at the Gothams kind of crystallized for me that people are really paying attention. Um, and Saoirse Ronan for the Outrun. I mean, she's been in the conversation since Sundance, but I think that the fact that she has been in the conversation for so long, and here we are with our first batch of award season nominees, and she's in the conversation. I think it's huge for her because I
Yeah.
think it's like a sign of like, oh, you thought this was just going to be a tiny Sundance thing that people have forgotten about. Not,
Not so.
not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's the interesting thing people are talking about with Saoirse, especially because she does have two movies coming out this year that are getting a lot of talk just for her. So we've got the Outrun, and then not appearing on our list is Blitz, which is one that Steve McQueen did. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm hearing a lot of huge buzz about her performance, especially. And so, like, she could do what Scarlett Johansson did a couple years ago and do lead actress and supporting actress in the same year. If it's what the voters want. And so I think that her being here is a good indicator that she's going to be in conversation no matter which movie they're talking about or both for the whole year, for the whole rest of
Yeah.
the year.
I am gonna just use this podcast to keep plugging my Oscar predictions, which you can read on In Session Film. But I do actually have her in both lead and supporting. I just feel like this feels like one of those years, like the Scarlett Johansson year, where there's like this coalition of support around her, and I feel like she's doing the campaigning, and people are kind of realizing like she's one of our best, and maybe she's been taken for granted. So this feels like a big year of coalescing around Saoirse Ronan. So I do have her as a double nominee, even though she didn't get both nominations for uh for Blitz. Sorry. Are there any sort of like missing people here that stood out to you?
Um, I think missing overall, and like one that kind of surprised me how many people have got behind him is Rafe Fiennes for Conclave. Like, I thought that was a really good performance, and that was kind of one of the ones that's been kind of simmering under the surface for a lot of people. But I think that he's going to make a lot of lists and he's going to make a lot of nominations. And so him missing here is not necessarily an indictment of that performance, but maybe a, a waiting. Like, we're kind of waiting to see what other people say about him before we kind of throw our weight behind him.
I think somebody that maybe got a knock from not being mentioned at the Gothams at all is Sebastian Stan. We don't see him for A Different Man. We don't see him for The Apprentice. I was really, really surprised. I really thought that he was going to be one of the people to show up here to kind of get a boost. So that was probably one of the biggest names where I was like, wait, where is he? Like, I like double checked the list because I was like, maybe I missed him, but nope.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna read outstanding supporting performance. Some fascinating people here as well. We have Yuri Borisov for Nora, Kieran Culkin for A Real Pain, Daniel Deadweiler for The Piano Lesson, Bridget Lindy Payne for I Saw the TV Glow, Natasha Leone, His Three Daughters, Clarence Macklin for Sing Sing, Katie O'Brien for Love Lies Bleeding, Guy Pearce for The Brutalist, Adam Pearson for A Different Man, Brian Tyree Henry for The Fire Inside. I have to tell you, Zach, this might be one of the best lists. Period. Like I'm just like knockout after knockout after knockout. Spoiler alert again for my own predictions. I have Yuri Borisov in my 5. I think he is phenomenal in Honora. I am so happy to see him get this mention alongside Mikey Madison. Mikey Madison, I mean, she is the star of the show. Absolutely, she deserves all the attention she's getting. But
Right.
I think he is phenomenal, and the final shot of that film is burned into my brain. I think about it once a day, and so to see the two of them get recognition here is amazing. I mean, Bridget Lindy Payne for I Saw the TV Glow is such a good nomination.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
I
I have yeah. Go
I
ahead.
I was just saying, I really love that, like, they're keeping the spring folks alive because they've got both Bridget Lundy Payne and Katie O'Brien for the Love Lies Bleeding, and that's really cool to see.
Katie O'Brien was maybe the biggest shocker for me because I just didn't think people. I thought Love Lies Waiting was one of those like, okay, cool fall movie. I mean, cool spring movie. A24 thing came and went. The fact that she showed up here, I think, is so cool, and she is phenomenal. And to me, Katie O'Brien in that film, I had never seen her in anything before, so it was kind of one of those things where I was like, "Who is that? Where did they come from? What else have they been in?" It was a huge kind of breakthrough performance moment for me. So to see her there is great. Adam Pearson for A Different Man. I
Yeah,
don't. I feel like maybe a month or so he was in a lot of different predictions, and maybe he's slipped a little bit. So I feel like he's gotten a much needed boost here.
for
How are
sure.
you feeling about that film and that? Because, like I said, having Sebastian Stan not here and having Adam here, and they're very much a pair. Like every
Yeah.
time you see an FYC event, they're always together. Their interviews are together. So I think it's interesting that he's here and Sebastian is not.
I think it's kind of a situation like we had last year with Leo DiCaprio and Lily Gladstone, where maybe
Mm,
um, I don't think he's taking a step back necessarily, but I think uh, Sebastian Stan is kind of saying, well, I have two performances that are being talked about, but you really should see my co-star because he does amazing work and he really puts in, the hours and is phenomenal. And so I think that that's where my mind goes with this nomination over him is that people are seeing the really phenomenal performance that he gave, and in a role that is definitely tailor made for him, but like he knocks out of the park.
hmm I think that's a great comparison with the Lily Gladstone. I feel like Adam Pearson is maybe he feels like the discovery of the season, and so people are more willing to embrace that as they should. He's phenomenal, but I think every time there's like a new sort of performer that we get to meet and embrace as the season goes along, voters are really drawn to that. And
Yeah,
I would love for Adam to be that this year. I have to mention how happy I am to see Clarence Macklin
yeah,
uh get the mention for Sing Sing. I feel like he's sort of maybe slipped in predictions, not in my predictions again. Uh, I adore that performance, and to be honest with you, there are times that I think that maybe he like outshone Coleman for me. I just was so moved by his work in Sing Sing. So anytime I see him get a mention anywhere, I'm just thrilled. What a phenomenal artist, and I'm just so happy. Guy Pearce for The Brutalist. I mean, I feel like Guy Pearce and Adrian Brody, like, they just feel like such locks, and I feel like they're names that, in terms of names that we're gonna see all season long,
yeah.
not a surprise there. Brian Tyree Henry, The Fire Inside. I know that that movie has been like sent out everywhere, and there is being a push made. Is it going to translate to anything? I don't know.
It's
Um,
the wonderful sports movie of the season, right? It's kind
mhm,
of like the inspirational one that sort of sneaks in, but we'll see if it goes the distance. But I think
yeah.
the fact that he's there and the film isn't making as broad a statement necessarily everywhere else. It's more of like a performance push for him.
One big question that I was going to ask you about is Natasha Lyonne. So his three daughters actually did pretty well nomination wise, but I've seen like a lot of people predicting Carrie Coon for his three daughters. I've seen screenplay predictions. I personally am very torn on. To me, it feels like the movie kind of came and went. Obviously, given the fact that that there are nominations here, people have been watching it. It
Right.
is easily available on Netflix. If anyone can go watch it. You should watch it. It's phenomenal. So I wonder, like, do you think that this could be one of those movies where just the fact that it's available for so long and in the, again, periphery of what people are talking about is something that's beneficial, or do you think this is just the Gotham's love Natasha Lyonne type of a?
I think you're close on that one. I think that they may have seen like somebody that's doing an outstanding job who doesn't get a lot of recognition in this kind of forum. Great, let's let's boost her a little bit. But I don't know. Netflix is a complicated one because it's obvious to me that they're going to make their really big push for Amelia Perez, and so to see a different Netflix one on here is like, oh, okay, well, maybe somebody saw this one before, or maybe they just decided, well, we like this one a little bit better, or something like that. But I think that for a movie like this, I think you're right. It is one where if you don't see it first weekend on Netflix, you're probably going to put it in your queue and wait a couple of months and kind of let it fester, kind of like I did. So
Yeah.
I'll admit
But
that.
I think it's interesting because I think there's a lot of performers here where I'm not really thinking about the Oscars, but I'm thinking about SAG. Like I said for
Mm,
Pamela Anderson, like I could see a scenario where she shows up at SAG. I could see a scenario where Natasha Lyonne or Carrie Coon show up at SAG. Like maybe these aren't like Oscar stamp type performances, but I could see again getting enough of a boost where like they show up elsewhere. I think that's gonna be kind of what I'm gonna be looking at is like who are the people that are going to be in the conversation this season that don't go all the way?
yeah,
Um,
I think that's tough too with multiple movies with people that are absolutely leads of their movies, but they're going to have to decide how they want to present themselves for these types of awards. So like Natasha Lyonne is in this supporting category, but she probably is in the majority of that movie. And
mhm.
same with what I'm hearing about Amelia Perez, where Zoe Saldana is within the entirety of that movie, but she's
Oh
gonna,
yeah, she's a co-lead. She's absolutely a co-lead. That's a nomination play.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean that I think
Mhm.
that's gonna go on a lot too, especially with
Mhm.
these types of movies competing against each other in this way. So I think you're right. I think a lot of these folks would probably, they have a lot of pull in SAG, or they have a lot of friends who are like super excited that they've done something great, and so they're ready to be like, yeah, we'll put you forward.
Well, I think Amelia Perez, because it may not have been eligible for some of the categories, but the performers could have gotten in and they didn't, which I think is
Yeah,
also an interesting omission. I wonder why. I don't know. The other thing that I always I think about this all season, is like who's the performer that's going to show up consistently and miss on Oscar nomination morning. And I feel like a lot of these performers that we've been talking about are those performers. Like I could see that being Demi Moore. Honestly, like I could see her being like number 6, where she shows up everywhere and then she's just not in the 5.
yeah.
Um, I think she's probably the person that's like the strongest of that vibe for me. I mean, do you have somebody or a performance maybe like that where you feel like they're gonna be in the conversation, but they're not gonna get all the way there?
Yeah, I feel like a couple of these folks are probably going to be in that. Well, these folks especially are going to be a constant teeter totter of, will they, won't they type of thing. I feel like the big one that's going to do that is Yura Borisov, because we're going to get a lot of early, because the movie just came out, and so we're going to get a lot of really hyped, jump on. It's going to be like a Charles Melton last year, right? Where like a whole bunch of people are going to be like, yes, this is the one. He's going to do it. He's going to go all the way. And then it just kind of dips off. So for me, that's probably who it's going to be this year.
That's fascinating. That's really interesting. Do you think it's because there's multiple men from Honora that are making a supporting play and maybe they split?
I think so. I think it's going to be definitely like, especially split between him and I'm totally blanking on his name, but the young
The
actor.
younger, yeah.
Yeah. They're definitely going to try and split those two guys. The same thing is going to happen. They don't make an appearance on here, but the same thing is going to happen with Conclave as well. Is that like those two really strong supporting performances of Stanley Tucci and John Lithgow are going to either negate each other, or one's going to get in and the other one's not, and then they're going to switch off all year. Kind of like what happened with Poor Things last year with Mark Ruffalo and Willem Dafoe.
And they both got in. So I wonder if because we're talking about having less movies, I wonder if that we're just going to see a lot of double co-star nominations, like a scenario where both Selena Gomez and Zoe Saldana get in. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think, like I said, because of Nora, that final scene to me is the highlight of that entire movie. So I feel like if you're gonna pick a supporting player, Yuri is who you would pick. But watch me, I'm gonna be like, oh, Zach called it on our November 4th podcast. When we do our like post nomination debrief, we're gonna be like, Zach, why did you curse Yuri Borisov's Oscar nomination? All right, since you're my screenplay guy, let's go through these. Read off the screenplay nominations, and I want to dig into these with you because these are super interesting.
I'm trying to find it here.
Sorry, I threw you for a curveball there.
Okay, well, we got start off Between the Temples. We got Evil Does Not Exist, Femme, His Three Daughters, and Janet Planet. It's really interesting, this group of nominees, because absolutely none of them are in the Best Feature nominees. And I think that's a really fascinating kind of shift, where usually you get at least, 2/3, 3/5, whatever, of nominees in the feature category, but this one just kind of blanks them all and says these are the ones we're going with. And I think for me, I am so surprised and overjoyed that Femme is in there. It's such a tiny, strange, wonderful movie that really gets at the heart of something and kind of twists the narrative to not be about victims, but be about kind of taking power back from those who victimize. And it's really great to see that there. And I think a lot of people probably have been predicting, a lot of international feature type categories for Evil Does Not Exist. And so to see it kind of pop up into a screenplay category is really cool too, because it's got such a deep conservationist and kind of capitalist kind of fighting in between each other sort of narrative. So it's kind of it's very apt for the time. And so it's cool to see it there.
Is that movie eligible for? I thought that movie was eligible last year. So I was even surprised to see it nominated for screenplay. I do like that was probably the most pleasant surprise because I thought people just kind of forgot about that movie and that the movie that I adore. Between the Temples, is that something you're familiar with? Because that was a new.
I haven't seen it, but I know it's a movie about Jason Schwartzman plays a rabbi who gets involved with Carol Kane. And I think they kind of have some sort of romantic or maybe platonic kind of love fest going on. It looked interesting, but kind of was one that I was going to save for some other time.
All right, sold. That actually sounds great. And Janet Planet, I haven't seen. Have you seen that one?
Strangely enough, the time that I bought a ticket to it, Fandango refunded my money and said they canceled the showing. So I lost out on that. I've been meaning to see it for a while, though. It looks really, really good. I like Julianne Nicholson, and so I really want to see what she does with that kind of role.
Mm. Well, interesting that she is not among the nominees because she would seem like somebody that would be a ripe. Yeah, I mean, again, his three daughters. I've seen a lot of people predicting that for screenplay. I could see that getting in as like maybe like the fifth slot for screenplay. So I was interested to see that show up here. I do really like that screen. Like if I was, I guess, to pick my favorite of the, well, actually, that's not true. My favorite of the five would be Evil Does Not Exist. But if I was picking in terms of who I think is more likely to be a player, it would be his three daughters.
Yeah,
I
that one
was, yeah.
definitely has that kind of feel to it, especially with the kind of family drama and such a wealth of character work within it.
I want to go to Best International Feature, which I've not seen. I've seen, let's see, three of the four here. And so we have All We Have Imagined is Light, which, if you don't know, was not picked up by any country, so it is not actually going to be Oscar eligible in the Best International Feature category. So it could pick up other nominations elsewhere, and I think there are other categories where we might see it be in contention, but it does not actually uh, is not going to be part of that particular category. And then we have Green Border, which, Zach, have you seen Green Border?
No, I actually haven't seen any of these, so these are kind of going on my list, I think.
So I saw Green Border at TIFF last year. We have an interview on the website with the director. I want to say her name is Inezga Holland. I'm so sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. But we do have an interview with her, which I will link in the show notes for this. But I saw it at TIFF last year, and it's one of those movies that I have thought about at least once a week since I saw it. It is an incredibly tough sit, but it is worth like it's like the kind of thing that like changes your brain chemistry where it's like it's a tough sit, but after you've seen it, it like gets into your bones type of a movie.
Right.
So I just want to shout that out because I think that's a movie that everyone should watch. And then we have Hard Truth and Vermiglio. Um, so those are our four. Uh, I don't think any of these are actually going to be, like I said, in contention for international feature, unfortunately. But this is just like a really solid list. And I would say if these movies are new to you, it's like throw a dart at the board, and I think you would end up with a really good viewing experience no matter what you see. Especially All We Imagine Is Light. It's just a phenomenal film and it not getting chosen to officially represent a country is just a shame.
Right.
And solid list there. Uh, any comments there, Zach?
No, I'm kind of just excited to see him, honestly. A lot of international films I have to wait either for uh, video on demand or usually January is when they pop up in theaters near me. So I keep a list and I keep an eye out for them.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about I admit my sort of blind spot is documentary feature because similarly as somebody who lives in the suburbs of Houston, I either have to drive a really long way to see some of these titles or they just don't get to me. So I have not seen any of these. But Zach, could you just let's just read them off.
Yeah. We got Dahomey at the top there. Intercepted. No Other Land. Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat. Sugarcane and Union. I have not seen any of these either,
Yeah,
but I do know that the one that's kind of been buzzed about is Dahomey, uh,
yeah.
and I think it's probably because of the ideas behind it, where it blends a lot of narrative and documentary aspects to it, and kind of builds a story about archaeology and peoples. So it's definitely the one that, and I think this one's actually coming to me within this month. We'll see, but it's one that is definitely kind of topping a lot of lists that I've seen.
Yeah, likewise, that's the title that I've seen on a lot of lists, but knowing how picky the Oscar documentary branch is, I wonder if it's the hybrid or if the sort of playing with the narrative aspect is actually going to hurt it here.
Hmm.
And then I've heard good things about No Other Land. As I said, I haven't seen it, but that's another one that has popped up a lot. Um, let's go to, oh my God, I'll let you do best director because I don't know if I can pronounce many of these names.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I'll struggle with the first one, but first one is Payal Kapadia, and it's all we imagine is light. And then we got Sean Baker for Honora, Guan Hu for Black Dog, James Schoenbrunn for I Saw the TV Glow, and Ramel Ross for Nickel Boys.
Have you seen Black Dog, Zach?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, that's the new one for me of the bunch where I wasn't familiar with that title to be honest.
Yeah.
Uh, and it seems like a tiny film, but I mean, I mean, Sean Baker, I think we can say solidly is
Safe.
going to be
Yeah.
a safe bet for the entire season and for a nomination. But talk about like some phenomenal directors getting a boost here. As I mentioned, All We Imagine Is Light is not going to be an international play, but we know that the best director branch is increasingly international. So having that be a part of the conversation, I think is huge. Jane getting that I Saw the TV Glow. I know you're a huge fan
I
of
love
that
it.
movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and then Ramel Ross for Nickel Boys. What a phenomenal nomination that is to see that get that boost and get that recognition there. I think this is a really solid category and really pleased to see some of those people get that recognition there.
Absolutely. I'm excited to see Nickel Boys. I thought it was a really great book. So what I've seen of the trailers and everything looks like such an inventive way to shoot that book. Because it's not an easy sit, as you said, for just dropped my phone, said for Green Border.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that's really good that he's kind of being put out there and kind of entering in the conversation early.
Yeah, Nickel Boys. Again, spoiler alert for my own. I think I have it right now only in sort of in the best supporting actress conversation for Anjanou Ellis Taylor. And when we did the podcast with Will Bjarnar, he did mention that it was like one of his favorite movies of the year. Like I've heard raves about this film. And so I really want to see it. I love the book. I'm a huge fan of Colson Whitehead. He's one of those authors where like when he comes out with a book, I'm gonna read it. I don't care what it's about. I don't even look at the plot. I just see he has a new book out. So I really like that, as you mentioned, we're getting these mentions early, and I hope that that's enough to build. Because I think right now, when we think of the Nickel Boys, I'm curious if you agree, we're looking at maybe it's like 11, 12, 13 territory, kind of off the cusp of the main group. And I wonder if these mentions are going to change that conversation.
Yeah, I think that anytime you can get a name out there, it's better. Like anytime you can just throw the name of your movie out there or throw the name of the director out there in whatever context that's positive is gonna keep it in people's minds and keep it in people's kind of periphery at least. And so I like seeing him here. I like seeing Jane Schoenbrunn here because it just kind of keeps their ideas from just fading away, and it keeps the possibility alive. That's what I love. I love this whole possibilities thing because it's so wide open.
Do you think, I mean, I think with I saw the TV glow, I think we can safely say, unfortunately, like something like director, picture, maybe a little too far out, but maybe something like screenplay, right? I mean, I
Yeah,
think it's not out of contention for, like, maybe that's one of those movies, as I mentioned earlier, that could get that sole screenplay nomination, which would still be huge for a tiny movie like that.
right. It still would be like awesome for that, and it would kind of validate the really intense writing of that movie and like the absolute beautiful layers that she put within it, and kind of the things that people are finding as they watch it and as they think about it days and days later. Like that's the kind of screenplay that you want in contention and to be talked about is something that's so original and so passionate.
Mhm. I'm gonna read Breakthrough Performer because we have some really interesting mentions here. So we have Lily, is it Collier for a good one? Brian Destiny for The Fire Inside, Maisie Stella for My Old Ass, Isaac Wang for Dee Dee, Brandon Wilson for Nickel Boys. Again, I love seeing the Nickel Boys mentioned here. I think he's going to be in contention for a lot of those younger actress prizes as we move through the season. Same thing with Isaac Wang from Dee Dee. I love Dee Dee. I wish Dee Dee was in conversation for more things. I think that should be a screenplay. As I mentioned, best supporting actress potentially. So I think seeing that name again still being out there and the fact that people are thinking about it from earlier in the year just makes me really, really, really happy. So solid nominations there. Zach, are you able to read off breakthrough director?
Absolutely. Let me get to it. Okay, so we've got Shuchi Talati for Girls Would Be Girls, India Donaldson for Good One, Alessandra Laccarazzo for In the Summers, Vera Drew for The People's Joker, and Madi Flyfield, To a Land Unknown.
How many of these have you been able to catch?
I have seen two of them, and honestly, they're two that I am super psyched to see in here. I have seen Girls Will Be Girls, which is utterly fascinating. I got to see it at Seattle Film Festival, um, and it has such a thriller coming of age, which is not a genre mashup you kind of see a lot, but it definitely has some interesting interplay between mother and daughter and kind of first love and school politics and things like that. That it's really cool to see her on here. And the other one that I've seen is The People's Joker, which is just bonkers. I kind of love it. The big swing of that one and telling such an absolutely personal story with you know uh, copyrighted characters. It's such a cool concept.
Yeah, that's the only film here that I've seen, and I just love this nomination because I just feel like maybe that'll encourage people to take more big swings like this,
Yeah,
just knowing that people have watched it and are taking notice of it. I think it's so cool that the Gothams nominated this. One of those nominations as I was going through the list that I was definitely cheering for. Like I had a moment where I was like, oh, uh, really, really, really exciting nomination there.
well, and what cool ground to break to have two different categories of director, and in both categories you nominate a trans woman, which is
Mhm.
really cool and so much well deserved. Both of these artists are really fantastic, and I'm super excited to see both of them here.
And I will say something that I really appreciate about the Gothams is they publish their jury members, which I think is really cool because we get to see exactly who voted on what. And obviously, all of the jury members are very talented and well deserving to be in that slot. But I think that I wish more groups were like more open and more sort of more open about who was making the decisions and how the votes were being tallied. I think that that's really really cool. And yeah, a lot of, as you mentioned, like just different types of artists that don't maybe may not get recognition getting recognition here was a real standout for me of these nominations. Shall we go to the best features
Let's do
and
it.
last category? All right. So we have what I will say controversially or otherwise, again, spoiler alert for my own predictions, Honora, which I think as at the moment I think is the front runner for Best Picture in
I
general.
agree.
I just,
Yeah.
just based on buzz. And then we also have Baby Girl, Challengers, A Different Man, and Nickel Boys. How are we feeling? I think this is a fantastic list. I really, really like this list. I feel I sound like a broken record, but I feel like there's just a lot of different things represented here. I love seeing challengers come
Yeah.
back. Interesting to see it here, given that it doesn't show up anywhere else. So that was kind of a surprise.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, Baby Girl, I'm not as high on as other people. I just didn't like it as much as other people did, but I think it's one of those movies that is either gonna get in, or maybe Nicole Kidman is gonna be number 6, right? Or maybe the screenplay is gonna be number 6. I'm still kind of torn on exactly where that movie is gonna land, but I think a major boost for that film. Really cool to see A Different Man here. Again, a movie that felt like prior to these nominations coming out was fading rather quickly, and I think got a good boost from these Gotham nominations, and then Nickel Boys. As I mentioned, I think getting that nomination and getting in just being in people's minds. Just I think the more you see something, that's just how
Yeah.
human nature works, right? It's gonna stick in your brain. So what a phenomenal mention there. Um, anything stand out here for you, Zach?
Well, I think the fascinating narrative I've kind of seen in this season that we're getting into is that Luca Guadagnino has two different movies that people are kind of championing. He's got Challengers and he's got Queer, and it almost feels like the year 2000 when Soderbergh had both Traffic and Aaron Brockovich kind of competing, and it kind of will be a zeitgeist moment, I think, if one or the other or both get picked for any category.
Yeah.
It's going to be fascinating because so much of Queer is based on such an old text, and like we've moved beyond that in kind of queer society and queer culture, whereas Challengers kind of challenges that notion because it has an almost openly queer relationship right there on screen, and kind of opens up the ideas behind, like, you
The
know,
fluidity of sexuality.
yeah, exactly. And
Mhm.
so, you know, it's going to be fascinating to see how those two interplay. And I think Challengers being here, keeping it in the conversation is great. I mean, I haven't seen Queer, so it could be, you know, beyond phenomenal, but like my big championing has been Challengers. I love it. So I think that, you know, the fact that it's staying alive is really exciting.
Yeah. Of the two films, Challengers is the one that I prefer. I just think Queer it just takes a while. I mean, I've heard other people. I think I was talking to Will about this, and he loved, or maybe it was Hector Gonzalez when he came and we were talking about Queer. But maybe I need to rewatch it. Maybe I just was not in the right headspace to appreciate it. But Challengers for me is again another one of those movies that I just think about a lot.
Mhm.
And I think that and again, I sound like a broken record, but as I was making my predictions, I was like, score. Like that seems like such an amazing score.
Yeah.
And then, I would love to see the performances in there. I don't think that's going to happen. I would love to see the screenplay. I think Justin's screenplay is phenomenal. And then you have something like Queer. I mean, you have the same cinematographer for both, which is fascinating. So I don't
Well, the
know if
same
that.
writers for both too.
Mhm. Yes, yes, you're absolutely right. And then I wonder, like, I think the Daniel Craig just star power is gonna push him through. I have him in my 5 right now for actor. So I think I'm so curious about that. But I don't. I mean, do you think right now like Guadagnino has a shot at director, or do you
I
think maybe
you know,
screen? I mean,
I feel like the field is sort of coalescing around kind of the three guys that everybody's talking about, which is Sean Baker, Brady Corbett, and I'm totally going to blank his name, but he's the director of Amelia Perez, um,
Jacques Audiard.
Jacques Audiard.
Mhm.
I think those three are so solid that literally anybody could just jump in there and
Mhm.
wouldn't be a surprise to any of us if they did. I think that a lot of people want Denis Villeneuve from Dune, and I think a lot of people would be really excited to see Ramel Ross from Nickel Boys. But at the same time, like because those two spots are so wide open, anything can really happen. I mean, it could go both to Guadagnino. Who
Yeah.
knows?
And again, to sounds a broken record about my own predictions, but the way that we're doing it on In Touch and Film is we have 10. So I felt like when I was making my list, and the reason why, apologies to my editor, JD, the reason why it took me so long to do it was because I felt like so confident about like one, two, three, four in most categories, right? And then I was like, have no idea, like 4 or 5. I feel like there's maybe 10 people that could be in that slot, right? Yeah, I have no idea. But I will say right now, I will go on record. Like, if Ramel Ross for the Nickel Boys gets in, I might faint. And, like, that might be the end. Or, I mean, as I mentioned, I'm so passionate about Sing Sing. Like, if the Clarence Macklin, Coleman Domingo thing comes through, like I think that would be the nomination that would just make me the happiest because I'm so passionate about that movie and I'm seeing so many people sort of pushing Clarence Macklin out of predictions and I can't have that happen. I think I would just be crushed. Like I try really, and it's so silly. Like I do get very emotionally invested in these races. I think we all do. But yeah, to that point, Zach, actually, that's a great question. What is a race or a category or a person that you feel rightly or wrongly too emotionally invested in at this particular moment in time?
Well, I have to go with June Squibb for Thelma. Like, I mean, I after I wrote that piece that I wrote for Chasing in Gold, I got the opportunity to interview her, and she's such a delightful person, and she has such a great outlook, but also has the absolute performance to back it up, and she also has just that kind of charisma that you don't really see for actors that age, and so it's really
Mm,
exciting to see that. And I think in a year like this, where we are sort of coalescing around certain themes or certain people, what if it was only actresses over 40? What if it was,
mm,
uh, actresses that have gotten, nothing but love for their entire careers, but have never gotten this chance, like Demi,
mm,
or like, I mean, the last Oscar that Nicole Kidman won was for The Hours in 2002. So, she's due. And so I think that with that, I'm putting my whole weight behind June Squibb. I think she's gonna be
yeah,
a
I would. I mean, I would love to see that happen. I love Thelma. Thelma is one of those movies, by the way, that I have recommended to everyone, and it is one of those movies that you could watch with literally anyone, and I think they would enjoy it. Like I think it's
yeah.
just across the board a solid film on so many different levels. I think if we saw a screenplay nomination for Thelma, that would be so cool. And not out of the realm of possibility because we know that Branch sort of loved those like tiny personal screenplays breakthrough. I feel like every year there's like one or two, so that could be a nomination for Josh Margolin. Yeah, I love Selma as well. That's one of those like from earlier in the year that I would love to see people still talking about. I mean, I feel like Night Bitch has completely, even before it has come out, people have written it off. I don't know if I'm ready to do that. I would still love to see Amy Adams as part of the conversation. I don't know if she is. Uh, I mean, Wicked has a massive question mark for me because, to be honest, I had completely written it off. I was like, maybe this is just going to be a craft thing. And in come these glowing reviews for Ariana Grande
Right?
and Cynthia Erivo, and I'm like, well, maybe I was too quick, so I had to rewrite some predictions there. Again, apologies to JD. I would be like, JD, like I'm putting my predictions up, and then I would like something would happen. I'd be like, nope, I have to do it again, or I would get like a new screener for something, and then I'd be like, oh, I have to redo. Like a real pain is a big question mark for me because I know a lot of people have Kieran Culkin like predicted to win. He's like maybe in that number two slot. And I'm like, is that, something that's going to come all the way from Sundance? I don't know. Like, is the screenplay, speaking of screenplay, going to be something that's going to be able to kind of carry all the way through?
I think it's got a lot of elements that voters like. It's got the emotional component and also a road trip and also the Holocaust. And so it's kind of gotten like all these things going for it. And I think with Jesse Eisenberg, as a filmmaker, like I watched maybe 45 minutes of his first movie and I was like, his first directorial movie, but it wasn't for me. But I think that like it comes out in a couple of weeks for me, and I think that that's like at the top of my to see list because I have watched the trailer and I've read about it. I'm like, yeah, I'm in. I'm all in. So let's see
Yeah.
what it looks like.
I'm seeing it on Thursday. I'm really excited. Speaking of which, as we sort of wrap, is there any movies that you've seen lately that you just want to geek out with me
Yeah.
for a second? I want to give you that space, a safe like therapy space to geek out with me about whatever it is that you're watching right now.
Well, it's gonna sound cheesy and corny, but I love cheesy and corny movies. And
Me too.
We Live in Time, amazing. I loved every single second of it. I can't imagine how many times I laughed, but also was weeping. And so like that's just a perfect, wonderful movie.
That's another movie that I saw at TIFF, and like I walked away like really liking it. And what has surprised me is again how much I just think about it. And I've said this so many times in my writing and in this podcast, but that's a big thing for me is like how often do I go back and think about a movie? Especially as you and I both see so many movies. Some movies you just don't think about at all
Yeah.
because but I just think about that movie so much. And again, if it was up to me, I would have that in screenplay. I would have Florence Pugh as a bigger
Oh
contender for
yes,
actress. Andrew Garfield, I think, is
man,
incredible.
he's so
Yeah.
good. Yeah,
Um, so again, I think there's just so many movies. And I think honestly, Zach, now that we're sort of talking this out, I think it's a shame that we've started to coalesce around titles rather quickly because I think what is happening is actually something like We Live in Time is being pushed out. Whereas if we were being more open-minded and maybe just gave ourselves more time,
right.
um, we could make some room and space for titles like this, but it just feels like, oh, you came and went already.
Yeah, it's at the end of the year. It just is such a rush. It's such a rush to get things out, get things in the conversation, and get things in front of people's eyes that like you just start missing things. I feel like a lot of people that happened a lot with the Iron Claw last year, where like a solid, excellent movie, great acting, excellent writing, phenomenal directing, just nothing.
Yeah.
Went came and
Yeah.
went.
Do you think, I mean, are there other movies that you think might be in that position of like drawing a blank, or maybe just because that's again something that I'm thinking of, like what are the movies that are like that I'm not, because I was making my predictions again. I feel like I should have made a drinking game out of this. But as I was making my as I was making my predictions, I kept thinking about like I feel like I'm just looking at names that everyone else has already mentioned, but that's what it feels like to me. It feels like we already have sort of it's starting to crystallize. And so I feel like is there somebody that could come out of left field that maybe does have enough time or enough pull in the industry to get get a nomination? And then the reverse of that is like, is there something like I don't know. Let's say the brutalist. Not that this is gonna happen, but like we're all saying, oh, the brutalist across the board, but maybe not. Maybe people are gonna like regular folks are gonna see it and be like, this is way too whatever for me, right? Like I'm trying to think about the movies that maybe are just not getting the consideration they deserve or too much consideration at this moment in time.
The one that's really making me depressed is The Bike Riders. Like, it's
Mm,
such a well-crafted movie. Plus, Jeff Nichols is an incredible filmmaker, and he makes great American movies about like really American themes. And he just keeps getting, pushed aside toward the end. Like, a lot of the conversation last year before the strikes kind of pushed everything a little bit, or even because like the original distributor dropped that movie, and so somebody else had to pick it up. I think a lot of that weirdness and controversy around it is just kind of like pushing it out of people's minds. But like Austin Butler is just so freaking good in that movie. Same with Tom Hardy and Jodie Comer. Like they're all just on another level, and the beauty of it, the way it's shot, the way it's scored, the way it's written is just too good to miss, and we're missing it. We're just letting it go, just letting it fly
mhm.
by.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned The Beast. I really love that movie. I've also, and I talked about this with Will last week. I think because we've had a lot of larger movies this year, like we have Gladiator 2, that's a big sort of spectacle. We had Dune. I mean, potentially, Furiosa might take a few spots. We have, oh my God, the vampire movie. No, Nosferatu coming out, that's going to be a big player. So like in terms of craft, I just keep thinking like, are we sticking to the big names, or is something like Long Legs or
Right.
something smaller that has like a really solid hair and makeup gonna break through, or like production design. Like I'm really big on, I really like Conclave. Conclave is doing very well at the box office. But then I'm like, are we overestimating Conclave? I don't know. Because you mentioned like having both Lithgow and Tucci. I have Tucci in my predictions just because I feel like he is such a likable guy, and I feel like he's an easier maybe name check than Lithgow, and is in more of the movie than John Lithgow. But then I'm like, uh, I mean, I would nominate that for basically every crowd. I mean, costumes and all of
Yeah.
that. But then I'm like, am I over? Like, am I too into Conclave? I don't know.
Well, that's hard to say because it is so well crafted, and
Yeah,
so much of what we've seen from Edward Berger, the director, is craft. Like,
yeah,
that shocker of All Quiet on the Western Front being just this juggernaut of nominations. um, it shows in his second movie that like he's not skimping again. He's
mhm,
really kind of amping it up. The fascinating thing about that movie too was that you can hear every breath Rafe Fiennes takes, and then like he's looking at that seal, he cracks the seal, and like you hear
mhm,
all this great stuff. So you know, with that movie, it's a wonderful mystery, and like gets people involved and gets people thinking about things, and very much like I told my mom and dad about it because they love mystery stories, and but then at the same time
mhm,
I'm thinking, but like it's got such beauty to it as well, and like so much detail and so much craft.
Yeah. No, and it's so funny because at TIFF, Berger mentioned that he said my last movie I took my crew into a war zone, so I told them for my next movie I would take them somewhere nicer, so I took them to Italy. But no, yeah, I'm just like I'm like, am I too? I don't know. Like I am fully, as I've mentioned, like on the Sing Sing train, and I feel like I'm about to get my heart just completely crushed. Um, The Apprentice is a big question mark for me too. I finally saw it, and I was like, this is it. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, right.
I don't know what I was expecting it to be, but it's like not. I don't know. But then I was like, okay, does Jeremy Strong, like, does the love for Jeremy Strong, is that enough to get him? I don't know. There's so many. Long story short, there's a lot of question marks.
Well, I think with those political movies too, because despite it taking place long before Donald Trump's political career, it is a political movie, and it is about politics. And so, what's fascinating too is like you think about a movie like Oliver Stone's W, or South Side with You, which was about Barack and Michelle's first date. And like you think about when those movies came out and how close they were to the time that those people were in office. And like they kind of didn't really make that kind of impression on awards or things like that. But a movie like Vice, where it came out several years after Dick Cheney was out of power, changed, that perspective and changed that idea. So I think with The Apprentice, it just came out way too quickly on the heels of Donald Trump's presidency and his reelection bid, to really kind of jump forward. And I think too many people don't know his history or don't care about his history. And they don't understand who Roy Cohn was.
Yeah. I do wonder, I mean, we are recording this on November 4th. I wonder if, depending on the way certain things go, if that's going to change things for that film or not. Yeah, I'm really, or maybe that's just a movie, like you mentioned, like South Side with You is not a movie that anyone has mentioned to me since it came out until you just said it.
It's one I think about a lot. I don't know. Maybe just me.
That might be one of those movies where like 5 years from now, we're like, remember The Apprentice? Remember when everyone thought that might be a thing? Do you, Zach, have any, I don't know, any question marks, any like thing that you're sort of mulling over at the moment as you're sort of, you just sent me your latest columns,
Yes.
so you're kind of finished for the month, but what are you sort of like mulling over or thinking about, or what are some question marks for you?
Yeah, I'm thinking a lot about history, especially with Best Actress, because a lot of kind of what's being talked about now are the diversity that we're going to see, hopefully, in that category, including the first trans actress possibly to be nominated for that category. And it got me thinking about last year and how big a deal it was for Lily Gladstone to be nominated, and then for like the big push for her to possibly win, and then the name being read. And so I'm kind of thinking a lot about that and how recently it has happened that way, where we get really behind one nominee and we think that that's just a mortal lock, and we obsess about them. And so kind of that's my big question mark right now, is like, even if we do all coalesce behind somebody and say, no, this is a mortal lock, this is going to win, who's going to be the spoiler? Who can jump in, who can kind of upset the balance, who can be the Anthony Hopkins to our Chadwick Boseman kind of thing.
Yeah. I've talked about this on the podcast. The more that I think about Amelia Perez, the less that I like it. I'm not a fan of that movie, but I think Carla Sofia is undeniable. Like I feel like she is the best part of that movie. She would be a very deserving winner, I think, if she won. Outside of, I mean, obviously the history speaks for itself. Outside of that, I just think it's a great performance, and I think she would deserve to win. I felt that way about Lily Gladstone as well. I was like, listen, I would love to see a bunch of history being made. But either way, she's great, and she would have been a very very deserving winner last year. No defense to Emma Stone, but then I feel that same way about like Mikey Madison. Like if Mikey Madison wins the Oscar, like you can't be. She's undeniably great as
Right.
well, and I feel like you can't be mad. Um, Now that I have you for Best Actress, I mean, who are your five right now? I guess I
I
haven't read your column yet. But who are your
Well, the column I hedged because I
five?
don't want to put it out there right now because I haven't seen Amelia Perez yet. I haven't seen
Mm.
Wicked yet. I haven't seen a couple of other things that I really want to see. And so I think if I had to make a choice now, uh, I could pick a top three maybe. And I think my top three would probably be Mikey Madison. I think that another one that I absolutely loved, and I don't think that the movie really resonated with me as much, but I think that to me more is just doing the greatest work she's done, and she's done some
Mm.
really incredible work. So she just kind of blew me away in The Substance. I can't stop thinking about that scene where she's about to go on a date with a guy and she's just staring into the mirror and like going back
Mm.
and forth for outfits, changing her makeup, just like that kind of building of her performance is beautiful. And I think number three, that's a tough call, but I think that if I had to choose now, I would probably say, gosh, I don't even have one. It's hard to pick, but I would say Jude Squibb. I'm going to stick with my
Yeah.
guns on that one.
I think for me, I feel like there's three that sort of feel safe. Well, maybe there's only two that feel safe, which is Mikey Madison and Carlos Sofia Gascon. I feel like I feel very confident. And then I feel Jolie getting in for Maria just feels right. It's a biopic. She hasn't had a nomination in many years. She has the Netflix machine behind her. She's promoting it. She's been everywhere. So that feels good to me. And Saoirse for the Outrun, also for the same reasons as we talked about earlier in the episode, feels like a solid number four. And then I feel like there's like that fifth slot. And I feel like a lot of people are being brave and producing Demi Moore right now. I don't know if I want to go there yet. I have Nicole Kidman in for Baby Girl just because I feel like, again, for a lot of the reasons that we've talked about, she hasn't been nominated in a while. This is a very brave performance, very stripped back, the kind of thing that the Oscars tend to go for. Kind of reminiscent of the work that she did in Rabbit Hole for me. But
Mhm.
then we have somebody like Marianne Jean Baptiste in Hard Truths, Fernanda Torres that's getting incredible reviews. As I mentioned, like I'm obsessed with Amy Adams in Night Bitch. I think she's great. Does Cynthia Erivo like come out of if Wicked is a strong enough player, does she come out of nowhere? She has Oscar history of her own. Uh, I don't know. I mean, I really wrestled with like the Demi Moore question. Right now, as I have her in six. I'm just not brave enough to pull the trigger and put her in the top five yet. I think if she continues to show up, like if she shows up at SAG, I think that would be huge. And I agree with you. I think she's really good. That was one of those movies where I was like, she can't be as good as people are saying she is, and I think she was actually even better. I was really blown away by what she did there. But fascinating race in Best Actress this year. Um, Anything else we should cover here before I let you go, Zach? Before we call it a day, call it an evening.
No, I think we've covered a lot. I think that's it's exciting. It's exciting to think about, the possibilities. I'm almost disappointed on nominations day just so I can't talk about movies with people anymore. And I can't say like, look at what could happen because it's
Yeah.
already
Well, you know what? That's a great idea for an episode, though, that we should do like a post-Oscar, like all the movies that didn't get in that we wanted to get in that we still want people to watch. I'll have you back for that.
sure.
A couple of sort of notes that I want to mention. For those of you that are watching on YouTube, you'll see that I'm wearing a Chasing the Gold shirt. In Session Film does have merch, so if you're looking for an easy way to support us, we do have lots of merch on the website available. Rate and review us. Rate tell your friends, tell your mom, tell your grandma. And then on a personal note, I do, as I mentioned, I live in the suburbs of Houston. Houston has an iconic River Oaks Theater that was, I think, the oldest theater in Texas. Struggled for many, many years. They kept trying to figure out every possible way to keep it open. They ended up having to close it down, but they reopened it and they've turned it into a like eat while you watch the movie type of restaurant, type of movie theater, like a draft house esque, but like an elevated high end Alamo draft house type of a cinema. I have not had the chance to go yet, but if you are in Houston or in the Houston suburbs, that is one of my favorite places in the entire city, and I think we should all support it because independent theaters really need our help, and it is a historic, gorgeous place. So if you're in the area, and there's like so much to do just outside of like you could make a whole day of just like going to the movies and going to everything else that's around it. So if you live in the Houston area, go to the River Oaks Theater. I'm so happy that it's back and open and gonna be a part of my Oscar season again this year. So yeah. Well, Zach, where can people find you on social media?
Well, I'm not on social media. You could probably find me on Letterboxd if you're interested. I'm at Z Youngs 108. Other than that, I do write for In Session, but I also just got a gig writing for a hyper local website here in Seattle. We're called the Evergreen Echo. Lots of arts and culture, an events page. I just covered the Seattle Queer Film Festival for them. So it's been a good time so far.
Well, since you mentioned it, what did you get to see at the festival that maybe was like not on your, or any just random film that delighted you from that
Yeah.
experience?
One of the ones that really kind of has stayed with me, and I'm going to blow the pronunciation, but it's Ashog or Asog, which is from the Philippines. And it's about a drag performer who tries to get to what's called the Miss Gay Shinkon competition in order to kind of win back the love of her life. It's a hybrid documentary narrative. A lot of the people in it were caught in Super Typhoon Haidon, and so they are still seeing 10 years later, they're still seeing a ton of devastation and a ton of kind of bullying from a lot of outside forces to try and get them off their land, and things like that. And so it's got a lot of really interesting moments to it, but it's also really funny and really like a joy to watch, and just kind of bizarre and wonderful. Yeah.
Can you mention the title one more time?
Yeah, it's spelled ASOG, and I believe it's called Ashog.
Cool. Well, when it comes, keep an eye out, and when it comes out, we can talk about it in more detail. That sounds awesome. Zach, thank you so much for talking about the Gothams with me, and talking about movies with me in general and geeking out with me. I love having you. You are welcome back quite literally anytime. All you have to do is message me and say, I want to be on the podcast, and you can build whatever episode you want. We can talk about whatever you want. We could have a cinematic therapy session if you would like. Whatever.
That might be necessary after tomorrow. We'll see.
Yes. Well, that's the thing is, I think it was Will that was like, "Hey, are you free to podcast on Wednesday?" And I was like, "Listen, I don't want to make plans for Wednesday. I don't know where I'm gonna be. I don't know how I'm gonna feel." Like, yeah. So whenever you said you were free on Monday, I was like, "Perfect." I was like, "This is what I need. I need a Monday podcast, not a Tuesday, not a Wednesday. I need a Monday." Yeah. A penultimate before the end of the world podcast. Listen, what a great way to end a Monday evening, though, Zach. What a great way to start the week, regardless of what happens this week. Yes. What a delight it was to start it with you. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely.